Most LSAT study plans fail before they even start, not because students are lazy or incapable, but because the plan itself is a mess. Here's what I mean. People will try to work on everything at the same time. They'll bounce between logical reasoning, reading comp, and timed practice tests without mastering any one skill. And they'll measure their progress only by their score, so when the score doesn't jump immediately, they panic. Now, the laser approach is different. It's built like a staircase. And what I mean by that is you only move on to the next step once you've mastered the one you're on. That means first you learn the tools, then you sharpen them until they're accurate, and finally you practice them in real-world conditions. Each phase has a single job, nothing extra, nothing just in case, and so this keeps you focused and makes sure you're always working on the one thing that will move your score up the fastest. And it can feel weird at first because you're going to be tempted to skip ahead to full practice tests because it feels like that's what real prep is. But just like you wouldn't run a marathon without training for that distance, you don't jump into full LSAT exams until you've trained each individual part. And I know this because this is usually the hardest mental shift for our students, trusting that the slow, focused work now is what leads to big jumps later. But once they buy in, study time suddenly gets way more productive, confidence goes up, and that frustration around not improving just disappears. The bottom line is that laser works because it doesn't try to do everything at once. It puts the right skill in the right order at the right time, and that's how you actually improve in 60 days. Now, in case you're wondering what LASER even is, LASER is an acronym standing for Learning, Accuracy, Sections, Exams, and Review, and it's the foundation of the study plans we create for our students at LSAT Unplugged. The first phase is learning, and that should take up the first couple weeks of your next 60 days. Learning is your foundation. If you skip this, everything else you do is going to be shaky. Your only job here in this phase is to understand the LSAT, how it works, how it tries to trick you, and what tools you're going to need to beat it. That is it. No timing, no chasing the score, no panicking because your friend already hit 165. Think of this like you're building a toolbox. You wouldn't build a house without first making sure you have a hammer, nails, and a measuring tape. Same deal with the LSAT. You've got to have the core tools before you can actually build speed and endurance. Now, we start with logical reasoning because this is where most of your points are going to come from. It's 2/3 of the test. Whenever you're evaluating any argument, always first find the conclusion and then the evidence. That's like finding the who and the why in a news story. If you don't know those, you're already lost. You also want to learn the big reasoning patterns like cause and effect, conditional logic, analogies, and overgeneralizations. You also want to start off with the most common question types, the ones you see over and over, most importantly, necessary assumption, inference, and flaw. And you start by drilling them. You pick one question type and do 5 or 10 of them untimed. You write out the task, the job to be done, in your own words. For example, in necessary assumption, I'm finding what must be true for this argument to work. Then, for every wrong answer, explain out loud why it's wrong. This is the work. Then, for reading comp, which is too often neglected, you want to learn how to read smarter, not just faster. So you break the passage into its structure, the intro, the main idea, the role of each paragraph, and the author's opinion. Then, after each passage, write the primary purpose in one sentence. You also want to learn to spot global questions like main point and primary purpose versus local questions which will ask you, for example, specific details or the meaning of a word or phrase in context. You also want to practice active reading, where you're marking shifts in opinion, contrasting viewpoints, and strong language. Now you might be asking, what should your weekly study rhythm look like? 5 days a week, 2 to 3 hours a day, that is all you need to make steady forward progress. Just 10, 15 hours a week is enough. If you can do more, that's great. If you can't even do 10 hours, might be okay, but you might want to consider a longer time frame. Now, how do you split your time? I would recommend something maybe like 60% logical reasoning, 30% reading comp, and 10% learning the test format, learning how to use Law Hub, how to navigate the platform, how to navigate the sections. Also, start a study binder now with 3 sections: the notes from what you learn, example questions that you got wrong or had difficulty with, and a blank section for mistakes you're going to log later. And I know that the learning phase can feel slow, but that's the point. I always have to remind our students that trying to speed through the learning phase is like rushing to pour concrete before it's mixed properly. It might feel like progress, but it's not going to hold when the pressure hits. So you got to build that foundation first. Now let's move on to the next phase, accuracy, which should be roughly weeks 3 to 4 in your plan. Now this is the phase where you stop being someone who studies for the LSAT and you start being dangerously consistent. In the learning phase, you got the tools. In the accuracy phase, you sharpen them until they're basically extensions of your brain. And here's the rule. If you can't get it right almost every single time when you're untimed, you are not yet ready to go faster. The two big rules for accuracy are, first, work untimed for most of your drills, and second, don't stop at I got it right. Now, when I say work untimed, the reason is you are not yet ready to try and beat the clock. You've got to train your brain to see the patterns and avoid the traps every single time. And if you can't get it untimed, you're definitely not getting it timed. So again, we are still in the early phases here. There will be plenty of time for timing later. Now, when I say don't stop at I got it right, what I mean is you should be able to explain exactly why the right answer is right and exactly why the wrong answers are wrong. If you can't explain it, it's a lucky guess you haven't truly yet mastered the material. Now, your secret weapon here is the error log, the mistake journal. Every mistake goes here, no exceptions. For each one, you write down the prep test number, the section number and the question type, the wrong answer you picked and why it's wrong, and why the right answer is right. This is not busy work, this is essential. This is how you spot patterns you can fix. Now let's talk about drills. You want to pick one question type, say flaw questions, and do 10 of them in a row untimed. And after each one, talk through your process out loud to your coach or tutor, to your study buddy, to your dog or cat, to the wall. Doesn't matter, you got to articulate it. Then a few days later, redo those same exact questions. Your goal here is instant accuracy. For reading comp drills, you just take one passage out of the 4, do it untimed. Then write out a short 3 to 4 bullet outline of the structure. Answer the questions slowly, double checking your reasoning before you commit. Then compare your notes to the explanations in the course you're taking, whether it's a written explanation, video explanation, or an explanation from your coach, doesn't matter. You want to see the reasoning in terms of how an expert got there. Then your end goal should be at least 80 to 90% untimed accuracy for the core question types, necessary assumption, inference, and flaw being the most important 3. You also want to be able to automatically reject the wrong answers and eliminate them, and you want to be building a growing error log that's actually helping you because you're drilling those weak spots and you're watching them disappear. Now, this is where our students' confidence skyrockets. They'll stop saying, I hope I get this one right, and they start saying, I know why this is right. And that shift from hoping to knowing is what makes them unstoppable when we add timing later. Now in weeks 5 and 6, we come to S for sections, the third phase of the laser approach. This is where we finally add timing, but only in small doses. Think of it like strength training. You don't go from lifting 20 pounds to deadlifting 300 in a single workout. You build up the weight slowly so you don't get crushed. In sections, we train for the pacing and the rhythm of the test, one section at a time, so that by the time you face a full LSAT, the timing feels automatic. Because if you start with full tests now, you're going to spread your focus too thin. Instead of fixing the section you're struggling with, you're just going to get a lower score and not even know why. So here's your section practice plan. You do 1 or 2 full sections a day, 35 minutes each with standard timing. You alternate days. So one day just logical reasoning, the next day just reading comp. Or maybe every other day you pair one logical reasoning section with one reading comp section back to back if you also want to work a bit on endurance at the same time. But you want to take short breaks if you're doing more than 3 sections in one sitting to mimic test day conditions. One other thing I love to recommend for my students is pacing checkpoints, because having checkpoints stops you from realizing that you're out of time when you still have 3 questions left. So for logical reasoning, you want to ideally aim to do the first 10 questions in roughly 10 minutes, to have a time bank built up to apply to the tougher questions later in the section. For reading comp, after the second passage, you want to have roughly 18 minutes remaining since you'll be about halfway through on average. If you find yourself consistently behind at these checkpoints, speed up a little. If you're ahead of schedule, slow down and make sure that your accuracy is maintaining. Now, immediately after you finish a timed setting, you want to mark any questions you guessed on or weren't totally sure about. You want to do the Socratic review method on those questions first, untimed, and log every single miss in your error log. Now, in this phase, if you find that you're losing time on a specific logical reasoning question type or a certain reading comp passage structure, you want to isolate that problem and re-drill it before your next day of timed sections. And this is the phase where our students start to feel in control of the test finally. They stop reacting to the clock and start managing it. And that is a huge mental shift. And it's exactly what you need before moving on to full exams, which is the next phase in weeks 7 and 8, E4 exams. And this, by the way, is the part that everyone thinks they should start with, but now, after learning, accuracy, and sections, you're actually ready for it. Exams are where you pull everything together, timing, stamina, focus, and strategy, and you get to see how it holds up under real test day conditions, which test your endurance. Now, if you had jumped into full tests earlier, it would have been like running a marathon after your first week at the gym. Painful and pointless. But now, every skill you've built gets stress tested exactly the way it will be on test day. That means your results actually tell you something useful. Now, the goal here when simulating the real LSAT is the accuracy of conditions. No cutting corners. You are doing 3 scored sections plus 1 unscored extra section to simulate the experimental, just like the real thing. You want to use LawHub, so you're getting the exact on-screen experience you'll have on test day using Prometric. You want to take it at the exact same time of day that you'll take the real LSAT, and you want to do it all in one sitting, no wandering to the fridge mid-section, no checking your phone, and you want to include that official 10-minute break after section 2. Now, some students will ask, can I take a full exam every day? And I'm like, you can if you want to run the risk of burnout. Much better to keep it slow and moderate with just 2 full exams per week. That's it. The days in between, you review your last test and you do some light drills in your weakest areas. More than 2 exams a week just burns your energy without giving you enough time to fix what you learned. And without review, practice test is nothing more than a score report. Now, if you get stuck on a question, don't sink 3 or 5 minutes into it. Don't get stuck in the quicksand. Guess strategically, flag it, skip it, move on, and come back later with the security of having completed the rest of the questions in the section. Now, you also want to check your timer at the pacing checkpoints we talked about earlier. And remember, not every question is worth the same effort, but they're all worth the same number of points. You want to spend your energy where it matters most. And when we work with students in this phase, we're not just tracking their scores, we're tracking how they handle the stress. Do they lose focus halfway through section 3? Do they rush their last reading comp passage? If you can fix these habits now, it means you don't get blindsided on the real thing. Now, the final phase of the laser approach is R for review, and this is ongoing throughout the entire 60-day period. And this is the phase that turns mistakes into points. For us, that means using the Socratic review method. If the other phases are where you learn to play the game, this is where you study your own game tape, break down every move, and make sure you never fall for the same trap twice. Now, most people, unfortunately, waste their review time. They'll check the answer key, they'll say to themselves, oh, I get it now, and they'll move on. But that is a complete waste of time because you learn nothing. Instead of passively accepting the right answer, you've got to interrogate your own thinking, question by question, until you can see exactly where you went wrong. First, you've got to recreate your thought process. Pretend you are back in the moment. What did you notice first? Why did you think that answer choice looked good? Then ask yourself why you fell for it. Was it a trap you'd seen before? Did you misunderstand the argument? Did the wording trick you? Then you've got to prove why the right answer is right. And don't just say it makes sense. Show yourself the reasoning chain that connects it back to the argument. And then you've got to also prove why each wrong answer is wrong, and I'm talking all 4 wrong answers, because this is where you start seeing patterns. Maybe you always fall for extreme language and reading comp, or the answers that are almost right but not quite in logical reasoning. Then, once you've broken down enough questions this way, you're going to start to notice themes. Maybe there are certain types of logical reasoning questions you keep missing, or maybe there are certain reading comp passage structures that consistently eat up your time, or certain topics that you don't like because, unfortunately, while the topic shouldn't matter, it sometimes does. Whatever the patterns are in your mistakes, you want to put them straight into your error log and drill them before your next practice test. Now, this final phase, too often neglected, the review process using the Socratic review method, is usually where the biggest jumps happen. Not from doing more questions, but from squeezing every last drop of learning out of the questions you've already done. Now remember, in the final weeks before the exam, you are not looking to take on any new material or try out any new strategies. At this point, you're just refining. You also want to do some quick confidence building drills in your strong areas. This is not to test yourself or expose yourself to new material. These should be some questions you've seen before, gotten right, and remember the answers to, you're just kind of going through the motions. And the morning of the test, you want to warm up with some easy logical reasoning questions or maybe an easy reading comp passage. Again, stuff you've done before just to get your brain moving. And that's it. Take this plan and go out and rock the test.